Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete a pre-Christmas episode of our Rimworld Extreme Desert Challenge. The steakhouse may not necessarily be in the most festive mood, but who knows what's going to happen throughout the episode. After all, life out here in the desert can be many things, but it sure won't get boring. Now, to start us off today, we are seeing Edmo here, still recovering from the injuries he suffered in the last episode, but hopefully back up on his feet in no time. And while Edmo's vitality slowly returns to him, we also have new life arrive in the desert. You can see it here, Labrador Noosa has given birth to 2 puppies. Now, we're not going to give these 2 a name as we're going to sell them. While we attempt to do that, Edmo is then also already fully healed again. Just a few seconds later, however, we also learn that exotic goods traders are apparently not interested in dogs. So, let's take matters into our own hands and send Redhawk and the 2 puppies out on a caravan trip. We can use this opportunity to also sell some of the flake we have made, as well as an unwanted revolver and the 2 remaining corsets. Apart from some medicine and a bedroll, we're not taking any other supplies. Redhawk just had breakfast and will be able to purchase more food at her destination. Speaking of which, she is of course visiting the Black Troska tribe, while the rest of our colony starts researching and making some food. As you can see, we are currently all out of simple meals, but with Edmo behind the stove, that is not going to last long. For the first time in this series, Steak will now also try his hands at some artwork. We are starting off simple with just a small marble sculpture, and I'm already curious about the image he has chosen to eternalize. Before we see the project come to a conclusion, however, Redhawk arrives at her destination, and we have brought a few things to sell. For the 2 puppies, the drugs, the revolver and the 2 corsets we can obtain just over 500 silver, and that is enough to grab some pemmican for the way back as well as some cheap insect meat, which we can combine with the next hay harvest to make plenty of kibble. For today, however, Redhawk will get some rest just like her 4 companions back home, and so we can skip ahead to the next morning. And that morning begins with Steak finishing his sculpture. As you can see here, it is actually of good quality. However, the imagery is, well, a bit disappointing, I'd say. A triangle bordered by 2 more triangles. That may not necessarily be the most creative artwork, but who knows, perhaps it also has a deeper meaning that we fail to understand. In any case, it will now beauty up our research room/hospital. A room that, if all things go according to plan, will also see a slight overhaul today, but more on that in due time. As you may have noticed, Steak has also dropped his top hat. The thing was simply getting a bit worn out, which is why Edmo is now making him some new headgear. This time though it's a beret, simply because that is a bit cheaper to make. Just in that moment, Redhawk also safely arrives back home. We now have more insect meat than actually fits inside of our freezer, and Steak can put on some fresh new headgear. Now, to at least get rid of some of the meat before it spoils, we're using rice to make more kibble here. And yes, I know that is actively jeopardizing our colonists' food supply, but we have so much rice growing so quickly inside of our hydroponics basins that I think we can afford to play things a bit risky here. The rest of the day, meanwhile, remains rather uneventful until late in the evening we have 2 events happening at once. First, we have a tribal war merchant arrive, and I'm definitely interested to see what they have for sale, even though they will of course not be able to offer us any high-tech weaponry. Secondly, we are then offered a quest, and once again this would be an opportunity to obtain another colonist. Unfortunately, she is already 71 years old, so there might be some health issues there, and she's also on the lock and key, guarded by 2 pirates, 6 turrets and 1 mortar. Now, the pirates alone are certainly not the issue, but I'm a bit worried about those turrets. In any case, I would like to hear your feedback before we engage. After all, we have 27 days to complete this quest, so let me know in the comments down below if you think we should attempt the rescue. Now, in the early morning hours, we have more action in the desert, as a small group of elk is passing by. In the meantime, the trade caravan has also arrived at the base. Unfortunately though, there is not a whole lot we can do here apart from selling Steak's old top hat. Steak himself, meanwhile, is already heading out beyond the borders of our base, because together with his buddy Jake, he is now going elk hunting. Now, elk can take quite a bit of punishment, so it will likely take a while for all 5 of them to go down here. On the bright side though, they are also extremely unlikely to become manhunters after being harmed, so we should hopefully be able to clear this group out without much issue. And indeed, that wasn't too difficult. All 5 elk have been killed or severely injured, which means our meat supply for the foreseeable future has been secured. And because meat is something that we are slowly starting to acquire more and more of, we can now watch Edmo complete a small upgrade to our freezer, just so we can store everything away from the scorching heat of the desert. The day then continues with drug and stone production, until, in the afternoon, the steakhouse is getting attacked. And 21 tribalists, that could be a bit of a challenge. Their sheer number alone will pose a problem for our turrets, so I think we will have to have our colonists help out. I had also hoped to maybe utilize the caravan for that, but just in that moment they are making the smart decision and leave, so we are all on our own. A few hours later then, in the evening, our enemies finally begin their attack, but I think we have a plan. Of course, we will turn on the turrets and put our colonists into firing positions, but we will also reuse a strategy that worked very nicely against the Cougars last time, as Edmo is once again putting on the suit of marine armor. Shortly after then, the attack hits and with it come our enemy's first casualties. Unfortunately though, one sneaky tribalist had a pretty smart idea, I'd say, as they have set fire to our stables. Now we'll have to deal with that in just a moment. We actually have an embarrassingly low number of colonists who are willing and capable of fighting fires, and all of those are currently occupied elsewhere. At the heart of the fight, however, is Edmo, in his marine armor swinging his hand talon, and what can I say, tribespeople seem to fall just as quickly as cougars. The rest of our enemies then appear to be occupied with our turrets, which allows our colonists to fire away freely, and even though our defenses take some damage in the process, that is nothing that we can't repair. In the end then, the attack is quickly decimated. We have lost only one turret in the process, and luckily we're also able to extinguish the fire in the stables before it can do any sort of serious damage. For Edmo, meanwhile, it is then back to the hospital, where Red Hawk can once again take care of his injuries. However, as we can see, he didn't suffer anything severe, a few cracks and bruises, but nothing that won't heal quickly. Now, among the injured is also one of our enemies, and I think we want to at least try to recruit her. Her traits are solid and she could be an excellent melee fighter, not to mention that if she joined us, she would instantly become the best crafter in the entire colony, so I think she at least deserves a chance. Patching up her injuries does take a while, but in the early morning hours her life is no longer in danger, and let's see how it goes from here. The day then continues with repair work, and Edmo also doesn't get a whole lot of time to rest. Our colony needs food, and this time meat is on the menu. Red Hawk meanwhile starts burning corpses, and so, slowly but steadily, the battlefield is being cleaned up, and in the evening we have a big rice harvest waiting for us, and since we now have another mouth to feed in our prisoner, at least temporarily, the extra food certainly comes at the right time. A few hours later then, Edmo has already made a full recovery, so he can now keep cooking for a few more hours while the rest of the colony goes to sleep. On the next morning then, the cleanup and repair work around the base continues, but it's also time for another very important harvest, as one of our 2 haygrass fields is finally fully grown. Combined with the tons of meat we have, we should now be able to feed our animals for the foreseeable future. As you can see here, after only a short time, Red Hawk and Jake have already harvested over 700 units of hay. In the evening then, new plants are in the ground, and so we can begin the hauling process, which will take a while even if all of our animals help, so we're likely not finishing that task today. Before the colony goes to sleep though, we have another problem to take care of. Our prisoner has had enough and she has now gone berserk. Now, unfortunately, we do not really have that many weapons that are meant to incapacitate instead of kill, and to be honest, I'm also not willing to take any risks here, so we're setting up the firing squad, and if she's lucky, then she survives. And before she can even get out of the cell, she goes down again. Still alive, yes, but once again severely injured, including, and this probably seals her fate, the loss of one of her kidneys, which is of course by no means a death sentence, but at this point it is probably more sensible to send her back to her faction instead of trying to keep recruiting her. Still, we can get a bit of medical training for Red Hawk here, and then it's time for everyone to go to bed. Early in the next morning, we then have my favorite event in the entire game, but we were smart about this. As you can see, only one of our 2 batteries has discharged, the other one is still at more or less full capacity, not that we would need it, considering that we now have a geothermal generator. From this point onwards, Edmo spends most of his day making kibble, while a dry thunderstorm rolls across the desert, and we also notice a lone iguana nibbling on one of our enemy corpses, a good chance for some target practice. Our kibble supply meanwhile rises rapidly, and as we're being informed of another pregnancy, you can already see it. Our dogs already have a healthy supply waiting for them, and a second delivery will be made to the other stables very soon. A short while later then, the moment I have been waiting for the entire episode, as Master Researcher Troy finally unlocks the secrets of microelectronics. Now, unfortunately, unlocking this alone is not going to cut it. We also need to build the now available high-tech research bench in order to be able to research any of the subsequent technologies. We will need to make some slight rearrangements to accommodate this much larger research bench, however, but that is no reason not to keep Troy busy, first with some drug production and then by researching the harp, a musical instrument that we might have a need for at some point down the line, especially should Steak continue to climb the royal ranks. Jake, meanwhile, can start making some rearrangements to clear a bit of space in front of our research hospital, while over in the kitchen, Edmo is fighting with an absolutely overwhelming amount of hay, but we also have a few more elk to butcher, not to mention a thrumbo, which gives a ton of meat as well. Around midnight then, we have yet another trade caravan arrive, and even before they reach the base, Steak already starts construction, as our hospital needs to be made just a tiny bit bigger. In the morning then, Red Hawk heads out to meet the caravan leader. Unfortunately though, his assortment of wares is a bit underwhelming, and so we only purchase a handful of components, which we will need as the high-tech research bench alone already requires 10 of them. Speaking of which, the size upgrade has been completed, so up next we're putting down some more sterile tiles. Before that work is done, however, let's quickly deal with our prisoner, because again, I think she has suffered enough. Her usefulness as a colonist has unfortunately also been drastically reduced, so I think the best course of action here is to simply let her go, which will at least give us a small faction relationship bonus. In the meantime, the sterile tiles have been put into place and it is now time for some furniture rearrangements. The biggest issue here is that the high-tech research bench is 5 tiles wide instead of 3. Still, I am planning to eventually fit 2 of them in here, at least until we build ourselves a proper hospital, but for the time being we have been able to get by with what we have. What we don't have, on the other hand, is a steady supply of steel, which is actually part of the reason why I'm so eager to get the high-tech research bench built, because that will then allow us to research deep drilling, a technology that lets us mine steel from the ground. For the rest of the day then, not a whole lot happens inside of the steakhouse. However, in the very early morning, the side effects from all the kibble making show themselves. Our kitchen has apparently gotten a bit dirty in the process, and as a result, Steak now suffers food poisoning. Now, interestingly enough, Edmo is not affected, but we're not taking any risks here. We have plenty of rice still stored away, so let's carry all the potentially tainted meals out into the desert to rot. In that moment then, our colony receives a nice mood boost, at least Red Hawk does, as a psychic soothe hits the steakhouse, so it looks like at least Red Hawk is getting into a festive spirit after all. Continuing with our room overhaul, we are now carrying one of our cryptosleep caskets into the prison cell, and then we disassemble our first simple workbench, as we no longer need it and we're getting back a good amount of steel. A short while later then, after some more rearrangements, Troy finishes researching the harp, but once again that was more of a filler project, and certainly nothing that we need to acquire right away. We will also not start anything new here, as the high-tech research bench is just a few moments away from being built. Unfortunately though, before that happens, a red hawk also gets food poisoning, which once again is a bit strange to me, considering that other colonists have been eating meals in the meantime as well. So perhaps one of the bad meals was still left over in the kitchen. In any case, I am somewhat confident that the rest of the meals are actually good to go, and we really don't have another choice either way. As you can see, we are once again out of rice. Around noon then, it suddenly gets dark in the steakhouse as an eclipse strikes the desert, but luckily with geothermal power the loss of our solar panels is nothing that we can't handle. And even though it's dark outside, the time has finally come. We now have enough materials to build our high-tech research bench, and the honors of construction go to Jake, who starts his work just as a rainy thunderstorm sets in. A short while later, our new massive research bench is then up and running, and that means we can immediately start the research of deep drilling. Our steel reserves left on the map are getting smaller every day. Our need for steel, on the other hand, is only going to increase. As a lovely side effect of the rain, all of the blood around the base is now also getting washed away. So for once, the outskirts of the steakhouse do not look like a battlefield. And I think that is actually a good, somewhat happy and optimistic note to end today's episode on. Yes, I know we have been a bit on the shorter side today. Nonetheless, I would say we made good progress. And it's Christmas after all, so you probably have better things to do than to watch YouTube videos. So let me wish each and every one of you some happy holidays, stay safe out there however you celebrate, and don't eat too much. Red Hawk and Steak just showed you what can happen. With that being said, let's wrap things up right here, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course do that, either by subscribing to stay up to date, by grabbing some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or by checking out and maybe even pledging to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.